Hi.
Hi.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad to see you. So glad that you could join us today, Dr. Simon Poole. And I know you tell me to call you Simon.
Of course, and thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure.
Yes, let me just tell the people just a little bit. We have today the world renowned, okay? The world renowned olive oil expert. But not only just olive oil, the olive oil diet expert. And I'm so excited, all the way from the UK. He sits on many boards, even boards that are here in the USA. So I am just so glad to have you here. I believe it's around 4 o'clock your time. It's in the morning for us on this side. So welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you, Chastity. Yeah, I have my cup of English tea here, my afternoon tea. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Oh,
So
wow.
yes, but it's a real pleasure to join you.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Poole, I was just thinking of, it's so much to this amazing book, The Olive Oil Diet, that you wrote. But I really want to know, at what moment or what point did you, I could say, fall in love with olive oil?
Yeah, so I guess the story started really about 15 or 20 years ago when I started to read medical journals and scientific research which showed just how powerful the Mediterranean diet was.
Yeah.
So we know that 70% perhaps of chronic diseases are potentially preventable through lifestyle measures. So I started to tell my patients all about the Mediterranean diet, and they came back feeling so much better, fitter, their blood pressures were lower, their cholesterol numbers were better. And then I started really understanding a little bit more about the role that extra virgin olive oil plays within the Mediterranean diet.
Mm-hmm.
And there are lots of different versions of the Mediterranean diet when you go around the Mediterranean, or indeed when you go around the world. There are lots of different versions, but it often comes down to the common themes of vegetables and extra virgin olive oil. And so then I became really fascinated by all the really powerful antioxidant and anti-inflammatory components in extra virgin olive oil, how it's produced, how people like yourselves kind of have to get the best olive oil and the freshest, and
Yeah.
And how you got involved with people who were interested in tasting,
Yeah.
and in fact you can taste the anti-inflammatory components. So that's when I started to write the olive oil diet, which was really the Mediterranean diet, but from the basis of an extra virgin olive oil perspective.
Yeah, I mean, that you just said a lot, and we're gonna dig into a little bit of that. We will be on this call all day just talking about olive oil. And one thing that I love about the olive oil diet, this book, is that you didn't just discuss the diet and what to eat and what not to eat, but you went into details about how it can prevent, how it can reverse different chronic diseases. And I really want to let my viewers know how having inflammation, how you wrote in the book, how having inflammation starts with the chronic diseases. Can you go into some of the details on that, and maybe even tell me about some patients that you've had, that you saw the results and you're like, this is what it is.
Yeah, so acute inflammation is really useful to the body, and it's what happens when we get an attack by an infection or something like that, and it's our own body's response to try and get rid of the attack. But chronic inflammation is when the inflammation is unchecked and it just continues, and there are often external triggers and factors that promote that inflammation. So things like toxins in our diet or in our environment, smoking, and so on. Obesity itself can actually promote inflammation, and quite a lot of foods are what we call pro-inflammatory. And we're now beginning to understand, for example, that a lot of vegetable oils contain quite a lot of components which are pro-inflammatory. So it's really important to prevent some of these diseases, which we now understand are related to chronic inflammation. We can support our bodies to lower the levels of inflammation by by eating an anti-inflammatory diet. And the Mediterranean diet is absolutely on the button as an anti-inflammatory diet, because a lot of the vegetable elements, a lot of the components to it are really good for suppressing inflammation. So it's what I call positive nutrition, because actually we're not talking about things that we shouldn't eat. We're talking about things that we can eat and enjoy, and they can lower our levels of inflammation and then reduce the risk of us getting heart disease and stroke. And as for a story about patients, well, I mean, this was not my research, but there was some very smart research done in Spain where they took some healthy volunteers and they denied them antioxidants and anti-inflammatories in their diet for 24, 48 hours. So they gave them a junk diet, basically, for a day or two. And then they measured in their blood markers of inflammation, levels of chemicals that denote the amount of inflammation that's going on. And these were not kind of in the abnormal range, but they were high within the normal range. And then they fed somebody a meal of these people, a meal of what's called sofrito in Spain or Italy, and it's a combination of extra virgin olive oil, onions, garlic, and tomatoes. And you know, within hours of that single meal, their inflammatory markers were reduced in their blood, which shows that actually what we eat today can affect our levels of inflammation. And so it's so important to have this really healthy anti-inflammatory diet. So that was a lovely experiment, and I like to think that can be reproduced. So every morning you get up and you think about your breakfast and you think, well, what shall I have that's a really great anti-inflammatory breakfast, whether it's blueberries or strawberries or nuts or even extra virgin olive oil with honey on a piece of toast for breakfast. You know, it's a great way to start the day to reduce the levels of inflammation.
You know what, Dr. Simon, you just said so much, and I'm smiling because this is what I teach my customers. I have seen, and before I go into that, the olive oil diet is the easiest diet that I think anybody can do. And you still get to enjoy the things that you like. You still, you know, you're not like, oh, I can't eat this, but it's about adding the good stuff, I should say. And not taking away so much of the food that you may enjoy. So I encourage this diet for all my customers, for my family, for everyone. And even for me, I have been on the olive oil diet for a month now. And I have lost weight by simply doing this diet. I have customers that within 4 days, heart pressure or high blood pressure is normal. I want to reach everyone, Dr. Simon, who's struggling, you know, with
well, you know,
weight.
I think people struggle with diet, partly because it's so difficult to sustain. And, you know, I think diet, you know, it stands for dare I eat that, because it's such a kind of negative thing, isn't it? Whereas actually the word diet, as you may know, comes from the ancient Greek dieta, which means way of life. And so
Lifestyle.
In studies, they reduce your weight much more gradually with the Mediterranean diet than you do on a crash diet. But it's, most importantly, it's sustained and it's sustainable. So I would advise everybody to kind of have a think about some goals, maybe just not too much calorie count, but just eat the right things, and make sure the portion sizes are good, and that you eat slowly and you know, eat in company, because it's been shown, evidence has shown that when we eat and we enjoy our food and we eat more slowly, if we're watching TV while we eat more quickly, we don't get those fullness messages, and we eat more. So it's about portion size, it's about eating things that are really great for you, things that are part of the Mediterranean diet, and then you can show sustained weight loss over time. And also, people will feel better. And let me tell you a little scientific secret that we don't talk about much, because being overweight can of course lead to problems. But you know that if you are a normal weight and you have what I call a SAD diet, which of course is the standard American diet.
Mm-hmm.
If you have the standard American diet, which is described as being a poor quality diet, and you're in a normal weight range, your chances of dying earlier are greater than somebody who is overweight on the Mediterranean diet.
Wow.
So it's just, so the Mediterranean diet is really protective, almost irrespective of weight. So it's just a great diet all around. And as we've talked about in terms of inflammation, you know, it's associated with lower rates of heart disease, of stroke, of blood pressure, lower rates of even dementia, lower rates of Alzheimer's disease.
Parkinson's, I know.
And so,
go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a really wonderful diet, because not only does it help you and support you in gradually and sensibly losing weight, eating the things that you enjoy, but it also protects you from those very, very long-term chronic conditions, whereas other crash diets might possibly increase your risk actually of getting sick from heart disease. If you have a diet which is high in meat but is very low in carbohydrates, actually you might increase your risks of disease, because high fiber carbohydrates actually are very protective in terms of bowel disease, for example. So it's a great, just off the shelf, ancient and traditional diet.
Yes, that it is amazing. And I want to hit on, you said calories, and 1 tablespoon of olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, 120 calories. People seem to, oh, that's too many calories, not thinking about the monounsaturated side. Or in your book, it says that, studies, and you can go into that. Tell us that. I'm not a calorie watcher. If I'm eating right, if I'm on this olive oil diet, there is no need for me to watch calories. It is.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And that's the beauty of it. Portion sizes and actually what you're eating is much more important, because calories don't, your body doesn't just figure, oh, well, these are calories, it just doesn't add up the calories in and calories out, and the calories that you haven't burnt makes tummy fat. It's not how your body works. Actually, the calories in extra virgin olive oil, there's been no evidence to show that they increase body fat. And in fact, actually, they do the reverse. So, and the other thing is about food combinations. So what is really interesting are facts like, for example, if you have a carbohydrate with your meal, of course, that causes the sugar levels to rise.
Yes.
And that potentially causes, an insulin response. And over time, if you have a lot of carbohydrate in your diet, then you can get lots of very high sugar rises, particularly if it's high GI carbohydrates. They release the sugars really, really quickly. But the one way to reduce the glycemic effect, that sugar rise on a bowl of some carbohydrate, is to add extra virgin olive oil. So in other words, if you go to Italy and you have a plate of pasta, well, it'll be a modest sized plate.
Right.
But what do? They drizzle extra virgin olive oil on it, and that suppresses the rise of the sugars from the pasta carbohydrates. Similarly, if you go to the Middle East and you have some Middle Eastern flatbread, again, you'll always be dipping it in extra virgin olive oil, and that again suppresses that sugar rise, so that even though it's got some calories, actually what you're doing is you're helping and supporting the insulin response, you're suppressing the rise of the sugars, and so you're actually going to do yourself much better by taking the extra virgin olive oil onto that carbohydrate than not. So it's much more complicated than just simply adding up your calories and thinking, I'm going to be heavier tomorrow because of what I've eaten.
Wow. Now, maybe I won't feel so guilty if I want to eat a little carbs, but I do cook everything in olive oil. But I know in the olive oil diet, there is a lot of whole wheat or wheat flour that that is typically in a lot of the recipes that are in this book. So if you want to say something about about the whole wheat and the grains.
So whole grains are a really important part of the Mediterranean diet, and as much as 40% can be from carbohydrates in the Mediterranean diet. And so whole grains, we know, are protective. They contain fiber, they contain B vitamins, they reduce the risk of bowel cancer. And so it's really important to have those carbohydrates in their very natural form. So whole grains, whether it's the wheat. And in fact, actually, the science has even moved on since that. And we're talking now about old grains being really even better for you. So things like spelt flour, some of the older, more traditional flours than wheat actually have lower glycemic profiles, so lower rises of the sugar. But it's the grain that keeps the sugar in the grain, and so it's released more slowly, so you don't get these peaks and troughs of sugar, which we know lead eventually to the sort of tiring of your insulin response, and then an increased risk of putting on weight, and an increased risk also, of course, of diabetes. So it's all about those whole grains combined with extra virgin olive oil, as you say, because that then suppresses it even further. And you can eat carbs, and so you can get all the fiber and the minerals and the B vitamins from those carbs if you have them as part of that great Mediterranean style diet.
And you know what? And all of that, this is why we call olive oil the liquid gold. This is why, you know, it is called the fruit juice, the medicine of fruit, you know, and so it is just so amazing for me to even continue to learn. You can never learn so much. It's always something new that is coming out, different studies. More people are consuming olive oil. But it's important. I've done some research, and I see that in the Black community, there is lower statistics on using olive oil. And so it is a part of my this journey to be able to educate my community and pretty much, you know, all of my consumers, but focus on my community about the health benefits of olive oil. I always, you know, let's not do the butter, let's not do the other vegetable oil. And going into that, can you tell us, and it's also in the olive oil diet book for my viewers, tell us about the different varieties of olive oil and why the extra virgin olive oil has the highest polyphenols. So can you go into that as well?
Yeah, so extra virgin olive oil is simply the fresh fruit juice from the olive, and it has to pass tasting standards and also chemical standards to define it as being that really high quality oil. Anything that is below that standard gets shipped off and gets processed and becomes just plain olive oil. But during that processes, most of these important polyphenol antioxidants, which we know have these great anti-inflammatory effects, are lost in that process. So the extra virgin olive oil is by far and away the best. And there are different varieties of olives that produce different taste qualities of oil, which is really exciting because actually you can have a kind of softer oil to have with a little bit of fish or salad, and you can have a more robust peppery oil to have with a piece of meat or something like that. And sometimes the taste of the oil reflects how many of these anti-inflammatory polyphenols it's got in it. So if you have an oil which tastes slightly peppery and slightly bitter, which are good qualities around them, so it'll have that fruitiness, but it'll also have a little bit of pepperiness and bitterness. That's probably got quite a lot of these important.
It hits you in the back of your throat. Like
yes, and the Italians talk of 3 cough olive oils. So you have a 1 cough oil, which is quite a mild oil. You have a 2 cough, and then if you cough 3 times after you sipped the extra virgin olive oil, that is a very robust, and that's probably got a lot of these polyphenols. And you know, there's an interesting story actually about how that cough has generated some fascinating science, because there was I'll tell you the story, if I may, about the cough story.
Please do. Our listeners, they are enjoying this conversation. So many hearts are going up. So
which is about what makes you cough with olive oil when you just have it tasted from a cup. When you put it on food, you get that softens that coughing.
Right.
But there's a lovely gentleman, a professor at the Monell Institute in Philadelphia, who was asked to test a cough medicine for one of the leading pharmaceutical companies, because ironically this cough medicine was making people cough, which was defeating its purpose, of course. And he identified that in that it was the liquid ibuprofen. that was causing this irritation in the back of the throat. And then coincidentally, a few weeks later, he went off to Sicily to a conference, and the Italians being Italians, they just invited him out for lunch straight away and said, taste our olive oil. And so he was about to dip some bread in, and they said, no, just taste the oil. And he tasted, and he got the cough, which he'd experienced with the cough medicine back in the States. So he took the oil back and identified in it, I'll shorten the story, he identified in it a substance called oleocanthal, which we know is a polyphenol, anti-inflammatory, antioxidant in good quality extra virgin olive oils. And that's what made him cough. And do you know, it has a very similar anti-inflammatory effect to ibuprofen. And so that's one of the coincidences around extra virgin olive oil. And of course, you know, if I have a patient who's had heart disease, I will give them a small dose of aspirin every day. And there's some research also showing that perhaps a small dose of aspirin reduces the risk of bowel cancer. So this small dose of an anti-inflammatory, but without the potential side effects that we get in medications like ibuprofen and aspirin, this small daily dose of oleocanthal naturally occurring in a nice, peppery, robust, coughing olive oil will give you probably some protection from chronic inflammation. So that's a fascinating story where science has kind of explained something around the traditional diet.
Wow, that is an amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing that. Go ahead.
I would love also, because you touched there on your community in particular, and the fact that the fact that you're reaching out to African Americans to engage them with the Mediterranean diet, and I am so respectful of that. I think, you know, you are a pioneer, if I might say so, Chastity, of that, and I'm so impressed because, you know, there is not a huge amount of evidence, but there is some emerging evidence, which is really exciting. Unfortunately, part of the, and I mustn't get political, but part of the issue about inequalities is that actually there's not much medical research done specifically on Black and African American communities. However, there have been some published articles about the Mediterranean diet, in particular for African American communities. And in 2018, for example, there was a review that came out of Harvard, which showed that in general, the science was showing that the Mediterranean diet had very similar effects to white populations as to Black populations, so reducing the risk of heart disease and stroke and so on. There's a study that's going on down in North Carolina, in a place I think called Lenoir, which is called the Healthy Heart Study, and that's showing, again, it's 65% I think of that population are African Americans, and it's showing the Mediterranean diet reducing the risk of diabetes and achieving sustained weight loss. There was a study that came out which showed that, again, African Americans were benefiting from the Mediterranean diet later on in life. They were showing lower levels of decline in mental functioning on the Mediterranean diet. And so, you know, this is really exciting. And there's also a research group down in Alabama who are doing, I think it's called the stroke belt down in Alabama, because there is a high incidence of stroke down there. And they're doing some studies, and again, trying to look at different populations and different communities and different ethnicities. And again, they are really, really powerfully showing that the Mediterranean diet reduces the risk of between 30 and 50% of heart attacks and strokes, including in Black American populations. So although there's always more research that's needed, you know, this is so important because, again, we know that Black communities often, because of health inequalities, are suffering more chronic conditions. And so I am absolutely, you know, I'm taking my hat off to you for your pioneering work in really taking the Mediterranean diet to your communities. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this interview, because, you know, when I saw that you were trailblazing around extra virgin olive oil, I was really excited. And just one final thing about that, which is that I don't know whether you know of an organization called Old Ways.
No.
They're based up in Boston. And Old Ways, who I'm very great friends with, have done they were the first ones to do a Mediterranean diet pyramid, which showed what kinds of foods you could eat. And they've also done an African American pyramid in terms of healthy living, and they work in association with Harvard. So again, it's back to the traditional roots of African American cooking and cuisine. And what I would like to see, though, one kind of one thing I would love to see is these two pyramids. The African American Heritage Pyramid they've got and the Mediterranean Diet Pyramid. I would love to see these pyramids coalesce and come together because the Mediterranean diet with extra virgin olive oil is clearly benefiting, as far as we can see from the evidence so far, clearly benefiting African American communities. I would love to I'd love you to go on after, later on today, have a look at that African American heritage diet, have a look at the Mediterranean diet, and say, okay, bringing these together with the med diet and maybe some other really helpful ingredients, I think is a really powerful way to communicate the benefits to your community, which I'm so excited about.
Wow, that makes me smile. Like I'm smiling on the inside and the outside. I wasn't familiar with those studies, and that's something definitely we can talk about offline. But I am just so happy to hear that. And it sounds like, doctors are more including it in their work and what they do for Black people, So I want to go back that you mentioned about strokes. And we know that clots or blood clots, they cause strokes. Tell us, and you probably already mentioned this, but this is things that we hear about. We are dying from strokes. It's a common death. Tell us, and I want the people just to be clear that this olive oil diet can prevent that and reverse that. I just want to be clear. I just want to let the people know.
And so the gold standard of medical studies are what's called randomized controlled trials, where you take a group of people and you give them a normal diet, and then you take another group and you give them, in this instance, the Mediterranean diet, and then you run with that for several years, and you see what effect that has. And there was a big study done in Spain called the Predimed study, where they looked at a community of 7,000 people on the Mediterranean diet, and they looked at an equivalent number of people who were not given the Mediterranean diet. And the rates of breast cancer, the rates of heart disease, the rates of early mortality, and the rates of stroke all went down so quickly that they actually had to end the study prematurely, because it was clearly unethical to keep those people who are not on the Mediterranean diet in the dark about what was happening, the benefits of people from the Mediterranean diet. And interestingly, there's a lot of research that's come out of that study, and they managed to do ultrasound tests of people's carotid arteries, which of course is the main artery that leads to the brain. And they were able to show that if people go on the Mediterranean diet, if people have these plaques, these obstructions, which are heralding the risk of a stroke, that those obstructions reduced by 30 to 50% over just a matter of a few years. So they were able to ultrasound, visualize those potential blockages, those early blockages, and they were able to show that they actually reversed when people went on the Mediterranean diet. So, incredibly powerful science, which one of my things as a physician is I really like to communicate this, because these are written in well-respected but journals that people don't kind of turn to every day, and I really want to get that kind of science out to people. And blood pressure as well. I mean, you mentioned that people who can monitor their own blood pressure, when they go on the Mediterranean diet that you're advising, they see their blood pressure come down. And of course, blood pressure is one of the risk factors for stroke as well. And so again, if you can bring your blood pressure down, with the Mediterranean diet, or my homage to it in the olive oil diet, but it's very similar, but it's just focusing on it more on extra virgin olive oil. But if you can bring your blood pressure down, then that will really help and support you and potentially prevent consequences of that, including stroke.
Wow, that is some good information, and the fact that you are a physician And a lot of physicians, they may not tell their patients, hey, get on this olive oil diet, you know, because they want them to maybe keep coming to them. They may want to keep getting their money. So, and a lot of doctors, some of my customers, their doctors never heard of the olive oil diet or the Mediterranean diet. And so for you to be able to be that voice and say, hey, this is what I'm going to tell my patients to do because I know it works, that just that says a lot about you and your heart and your character. So I'm glad to hear that another doctor is on this more holistic, you know, side of medicine. So
I think there are more physicians now becoming interested in lifestyle medicine, but you're right. The trouble is the medical model is that people will come to us with conditions and we then try and fix them. Whereas actually it's so much so much more rewarding to talk to people about how they can feel better, how they can and adopt a healthier lifestyle and prevent them getting sick in the first place.
yes.
So it's something that I'm very passionate about.
Yeah.
And I started just by talking to my patients, and then they would say to me, look, can you come and talk to us in the village hall? Can you come and talk to us in the local school? Because I couldn't, as you know, because we've been chatting now probably for quite a long time.
I know,
and,
yeah.
So they invited me out to speak, so I would go out and speak to them, and then really my interest snowballed from there, and writing a book, and now I'm very privileged in getting invited to quite a lot of nice places to talk and help people understand the diet.
Yes. That is, I'm like in awe right now. I know that we are on, I don't want to waste your evening. We can talk all day about olive oil. You're passionate about it. I'm passionate about it. And the people who are listening to us, they are loving it. I do have one question that is in the, okay, no, that's not a question, but I want to let the people who are listening to this book, The Olive Oil Diet, is absolutely amazing. Not only does it break down the olive oil itself, but it goes into the diet with different foods and with different recipes. So it is just an amazing book. But I also want to, if you want to touch a little bit on the Mediterranean diet book that I know that you're getting ready to write. I'm not sure if it's finished or not, but if you want to say something about that and how they can purchase your book and how maybe they can follow you on Instagram or Facebook.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so I'm on at Taste of the Med on Instagram, and on Facebook. My professional page is just Facebook.com/Dr. Simon Poole, and you can certainly follow me on there, or on Twitter, Taste of the Med again. The latest book, which I've got a special preview proof of it here. This is actually not. This is not the final version, but we've got a proof.
It's beautiful.
It's a kind of coffee table book. Thank you. So it's called The Real Mediterranean Diet. It's just gone up on the UK Amazon site, but it will be available on Amazon.com and as pre-orders, because we're expecting to publish it later this month. And that's The Real Mediterranean Diet is really digging deeper into the Mediterranean diet, some of the history about the diet, because this is a diet that's not a fad diet. It's a diet of over many millennia.
Yes.
It's evolved, and it's incorporated ingredients from other countries, like tomatoes from the US, from it brought over, and tahini from Ethiopia. Yeah. Did you have much tahini in the US?
Well, they sell it in the stores. Probably, I'm sure it's processed, but we do have it.
Okay. So try and get yourself some tahini, because that's the base ingredient for hummus.
Yeah.
So for hummus, okay. So and they brought it up to the Mediterranean originally from Ethiopia. Mm-hmm. So it's an African product, which is fabulous. Yeah. And so tahini, get some tahini, and perhaps your listeners as well. Get some tahini and some chickpeas and some lemon juice and a little bit of garlic and one of your very special extra virgin olive oils to give it also a little bit, put it in a food processor, and you've got the most fantastic hummus. So think about tahini in that way. So it's
Yes.
bringing all the ingredients. So it talks about the history, and how it's evolved, and how actually the Mediterranean diet is evolving, because it was originally in the Mediterranean
Yeah.
in a basin 2 or 3 thousand years ago, but actually it's now spreading across the world. So we've got olive growers now in southern Africa. So there are some African olive growers. They've been around for 100 years or so, but now actually African farmers are getting really interested in olive oil in the Western Cape.
Uh-huh.
And we know that the Franciscan monks, of course, took the olive tree up the west coast of the USA to California.
Yes.
And so it's an evolving diet, and I wanted to
Yes.
kind of capture some of that in the book, which is hopefully kind of helps people to understand about where the Mediterranean diet
Came
came
from.
from,
Yeah.
what it is, and even where it's going. So we've got
Yes.
some wonderful recipes from some great friends who are world-renowned chefs, who've just kind of donated recipes to me to show off their what their latest interpretation of the Mediterranean diet is. So hopefully people enjoy it as a
Yes.
storybook, a story of the Mediterranean diet, and also with some very generously donated recipes from people like Amy Riolo and Maria Loy up in New York,
Yeah.
and great recipes in the book.
Oh, wow. I am so excited. I'm always doing recipes and cooking myself. So I'm really excited about this book. And maybe we can have you back to discuss the book, another book of yours. So thank
That
you,
would be great.
so much for being here. Let's continue, to get the word out about the olive oil Mediterranean diet. And, eventually, who knows, I may come to the UK to visit, or
That would be great. I would love to show you around Cambridge. That would be fabulous.
thank
Yes,
you.
absolutely.
Yes.
And I wish you all the very best with your continuing pioneering, and I know it may embarrass you, but I would say it again, your trailblazing work with your community to get those great diets to them, including the Mediterranean diet and lots of extra virgin olive oil.
Thank you so much. And it's people like you who make it easier for me. So by being here this morning or in the afternoon for you, I am so appreciative, and I thank you so much. And we will be in touch.
We will. That's an absolute pleasure, Cassidy.
Okay. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.